All right, and we are live. I'm going to fix my view right here because I'm going to welcome you guys to another self love conversation. My name is Gloria Ward, and I'm the founder of this I'm Loving Me project, where we inspire you to love yourself. We inspire you to be the best version of yourself. As you guys know, if you're not living your best life and doing the things that you want to do with your life, I'm going to ask you, what in the world are you waiting for? And tonight we have an amazing guest. She's an associate marriage and family therapist. Her name is Miss Jennifer. Miss Jennifer Adams. Jennifer, thank you so
Hi,
much for being
everyone.
here. I want you to do your own introduction so that people will know who you are. But then I want to talk about a couple of things. I do want to talk about trauma. I want to talk about self care. I want to talk
Mm.
about business and how you actually did the transition. So introduce yourself to the audience if you can.
Yes. So, hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Adams. I am an associate marriage and family therapist. So, what that means is that I am about less than 300 hours away from finishing my 3,000 hours. I'm going to take the test and get licensed. So, I'm working underneath my boss's license right now. And on top of it, I serve at my work on two different committees. They started and created a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, as well as a trauma informed care committee. And me specializing in trauma, they were like, we need you. I was very honored to be on that because as we'll talk more, I nerd out on trauma and how to heal from the body, mind, and spirit. And I also have a business. I have a marketing agency where I use storytelling through visual medium. I love to do Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that kind of thing for my clients. And each client is just so different. So it's great because I get to take my marketing and journalism background and I get to create unique content or take any pictures of their products that they have and make it more spiffy and awesome. And I'm just all about relationships with people, so that kind of intertwined. I actually started my business after a divorce a couple years ago, and I needed to create extra income, but I didn't want to leave my job because I really loved my job.
That's right.
But you don't make that much money working in community mental health. But
Correct.
I knew that the work that I was doing with my clients, where I was at, that kind of thing, um, I, wasn't wanting to quit that. And
Mhm.
so I was like, well, what can I do that won't interfere with my job? That I can, do part time, not full time because I already work full time.
Right.
What can I do? And I was like, you know what? I'm really good at marketing. I had already been doing it on my Instagram. I have 21.7 thousand followers.
Wow.
So
Good for
not
you.
bad after several years of being on that platform. It took a long
Yeah.
time, not overnight success. Um, but that's what ended up happening. And then I was looking into programs and found a really awesome PhD program that specializes in trauma work.
Mhm.
I'm in California, so I looked at schools like Pepperdine and, all these high end, colleges and universities. And I was just kind of like, they had maybe two or three classes that specialized on trauma, but nothing else. And I was like, really? Am I going to spend an arm and a leg in student loans when that's it?
Right.
So I found one that had trauma and disaster relief at North Central University, which is online. It is accredited, so it is a legit school.
Mhm.
Definitely looked into that before anything.
Right.
And I looked at their curriculum, and they had about 10 plus classes on traumatic stress and the psychology of violence. And I just looked at the curriculum and I was like, that's it, that right there. And I've taken a couple classes, so I'm almost 1 year down. And the trauma classes are incredible. I have some basic stuff like statistics, pray for me right now. But
Mhm.
other than that, the classes have been good.
So I want to go ahead and first talk about the trauma, right? Because that I don't know if you know, but the more that I do this work, It's becoming like a buzzword up there with self-care and the mental health and taking care of yourself. And it makes me excited because people are finally getting and understanding that those feelings that you have inside of you, those things that don't seem right, and you're trying to figure out why you're not where you are in your life, why you're having a hard time doing certain things, why are you so snappy and angry? They don't understand that it is the trauma that goes along with it, right? So,
Yeah.
like you, I've been studying. I have this book, Trauma Recovery and Empowerment, right?
Yes.
Which is awesome.
Wait, is
So,
that by Nadine Harris?
uh, yep,
Yep. She's
yep.
she's leading the initiative in California for ACEs. Have you heard about
Oh man, that is exciting.
that? Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so I look at that and I say, for women, we do so much, Jennifer, with our lives, because that's how society has taught us to, to be that wife, to be that girlfriend, to look skinny, to, be that good girl. Don't put yourself out there. Don't do all this. Where that stuff is traumatic in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Definitely.
Can you help us to understand like this whole trauma thing? Like, if you can explain what it is, because everybody think it's so traumatic. You got to be raped, molested, this, that, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Explain what it is and kind of give us some insight of, really how it affects you from a woman's point of view.
Yeah. So I like to think of, I mean, everyone can identify trauma differently, but the more and more research that I've seen, the more I've seen trauma and then our response to whatever happens is on the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be something, I mean, sometimes people will try to say like, oh, one trauma is worse than another.
Right.
But I mean, honestly, we're just starting to see that Dr. Nadine Harris, she actually started this initiative in California and other states and stuff like that called ACEs, and it's Adverse
Mm-hmm.
Childhood Experiences. And a lot of research is now showing that when we go through any kind of traumatic event, whether it's not having access to adequate food, shelter, safety, anything
Right.
like that, depending on a person's faith, culture, geographical location, right? All of that can be very traumatic, right? Because in a sense, you might be seeing someone in a different state or a different country having access to these things. And you're like, well, why don't we, right?
Right.
Why are we being left out? It could be something as far as in relationships. The earliest relationships that we make with people are the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever that parent figure is, whether it's a mom, dad, two moms, two dads, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, anything like that, we learn, right? Like we learn
Right.
through patterns and that kind of thing. And what ends up happening is, our basic needs, right? Like food, shelter, love, safety, that kind of thing. Sometimes those aren't there,
Right.
right? And then later in adulthood, we will see that we might gravitate towards toxic men. We might gravitate towards, you know, self harm, suicidal attempts, anything like that. So I like to think of trauma as a response to a certain situation that either makes the situation unsafe, unloved, something like that usually ends up happening and causing that fight, flight, or freeze response in our body. It could be something minor as a car crash, or it could be someone serving our country and getting PTSD based on
Yeah.
this that they've seen.
I would tell people all the time as a kid, me growing up in the Bronx, growing up in the hood, you will see people fight all the time.
Mhm.
And as traumatic it will be, we would form a circle around the people who were fighting because it was a form of entertainment,
Mhm.
not knowing how traumatic it was because as you get older, you feel that the way that you protect yourself is to fight,
Mhm.
right? Which
Yes,
is pretty traumatic.
that's actually a
Well,
survival response.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? And this is what I was trying to tell some of my friends, just how we think that the things that don't bother us really have had an effect on us.
Mhm.
Like, you can see somebody walk down the street with a gun and start shooting all over the place. As a kid, I remember running in the building,
Yeah.
waiting for it to be over, but then you go right back outside and play like nothing happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you hear gunshots or anything like that in your surroundings, you immediately know what to do and it doesn't phase you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the trauma doesn't have to be something where you're raped or hit or beat or anything like that. It could be those little subtle things, like you said, you see abuse, you see all these things, and then something just clicks and it happens to you where your mind knows that it's not okay, like your first
Mm-hmm.
mind. But when somebody put their hands on you for the first time and you go into that shock, you're saying to yourself, I remember this.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, because I saw my mom get hit, I saw my sister get hit, I saw people get beat up,
Yeah.
right? And so we don't even know how it affects us until,
Mm-hmm.
something goes wrong in our life, or we try to progress towards a goal or something,
Mm-hmm. Or
like
relationships. It'll
or
show a lot of
relationships,
the
which is
time.
big,
Relationships.
right? And we wondering why we can't get along with the people, why we're having a divorce, what is going on, and we want to be able to blame the other person.
Oh, yes. I can actually relate to that personally because I grew up in a domestic violence home. So my dad would go after my mom and go after my brother. He would never come after me. He'd like yell at my room to get clean, but like
Yeah.
nothing to the extent that I saw, like
Hmm.
with my dad hitting, punching, and I was for 20 some plus years, I was around nothing but screaming, yelling, punching, fighting,
Right.
cursing, cops being called, all that kind of stuff. And I never understood that that was like traumatic, right?
Right.
Because I knew as a child growing up, oh, parents fight, parents argue, blah, 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 blah. I knew that in my head something was wrong about the physical. I was like, something's wrong about me seeing certain things that I saw. I'm like, that's not what? And like, when people get drunk and stuff like that, when the aggression comes out, it's obviously not always, but sometimes it has to do with like unresolved anger, something that's going on. So I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't understand as a young child, really wouldn't at that point. I wouldn't understand why when someone would drink, they would get aggressive, blah, 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 and things would happen. And I just remember knowing it wasn't right. Something wasn't right. But
Right.
I just dismissed it as, oh, my parents are arguing, my parents are fighting, whatever. But it's interesting because I didn't realize this until many, many, many years later when I was in therapy that I got involved in middle school and a little bit under in like local swim team and sports and in high school clubs and all these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And now I realize I didn't want to go home.
Oh,
I
see,
didn't
we
want to go
have the
home. I
same
thought it was just,
thing.
I was great with
Yes.
people and I was loving it. And I did do really good in the clubs and sports, not like amazing at sports, but I did average. And so I just didn't realize until later that, like, oh, I was doing those things because at that time, where I lived in Florida, because I'm originally from Florida and I'm in Los Angeles now for the last 7 years, my my elementary, my middle school, and my high school were within walking distance. So they were
Mm.
kind of in like an L shape. It was really weird, but
Uh,
Florida. But that's what's so interesting is that you don't realize these things. And then later in my life, I actually ended up getting married at one point, and the guy was fine the first year and a half that we were dating, that we were married, all that kind of thing. And then when the second year started getting closer and closer, I started seeing trauma manifest in him. And I didn't know this because he hid it from me. I mean, some people, if you know about narcissism, they're really good at hiding these things.
Yes.
Learned real quick what that was. And once I started to advance in my career and stuff like that, he got upset and he got mad, and all of his like inner healing started getting triggered. I don't know how he thought he would avoid that marrying a trauma therapist, but
Right. It's, you
and
know,
I would definitely think to myself, like when I had to go through, because he eventually started getting aggressive. Thankfully, he didn't
Mhm.
go to physical, but
Right.
I think he didn't go to physical because I stopped it before it got there.
Gotcha.
And that's what I think is just so important, because if I wouldn't have seen that stuff growing up,
Mm-hmm.
I might have been one of those women that would have stayed and helped, because from the church, I was saying, they were telling me, you're not praying hard enough,
Oh,
that
Lord.
you need to go home and pray the demons out of him and play
Mm.
worship music and all this. And then from the psychology community, they were like, oh, well, you're a therapist, you should have known the warning signs like way before. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, you don't always know the warning signs. Sometimes
That's right.
people don't show their true colors until they want to show their true colors.
That's right.
And so it's so interesting. But on the benefit side, because I had been in therapy for many years, because of, seeing all the stuff from my childhood and recognizing that's not good, that's not healthy, I got out before it went to that level, you
Gotcha.
know, and that is by the grace of God. That is by, and I even did the whole calling the domestic abuse hotline. I did the
Mm-hmm.
whole calling peace over violence. I called every hotline we give our clients. And I
Wow.
was so shocked, because the system and these numbers were like, well, we can't do anything until he hits you.
Yeah,
What?
that's exactly. I see.
What?
I was the observer.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was the observer, I would tell myself that's never going to happen to me.
Yep.
Like the trauma was
Right.
there, but it was never going to happen to me. And I just had an aha moment when you were talking, because I put it in my book that school was my way out,
Mm-hmm.
because I too used school because I didn't want to go home, because that's where the sadness was, that's where the yelling was, that's where all of the stuff was. But my question to you, Jennifer, is as we get older, right? You have your own family, you start your own relationships and everything. And now you got goals. Like you want to be better.
Yeah.
You want to thrive,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you don't know that traumatic things happen to you, because
Yeah.
people would tell you, oh no, I came from a good family. I was never raped. I was never this. I was never that. My family was great, very loving. And I just sit there and I listen and I'm like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
how do you start to recognize in you
Mm-hmm.
that there is something, because that's what a lot of us don't know. Like,
Yeah.
if it wasn't for me going to jail so many times, in alcohol treatment, all this stuff, I would not have been at this point, because I would have thought that everything was together if I did not get in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
knowing I had all this trauma, right? Do we have to wait until we hit rock bottom to know that there is a problem? Or is there something or signs or whatever that we can pay attention to
Yeah.
see if it's really affecting our lives? Because that's what people don't talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's definitely two sides to that coin, because unfortunately, and I'll be real and honest, and if anyone has worked in addiction treatment, sometimes this has to happen. Sometimes that person does have to hit rock bottom.
Okay.
To be real and to be frank, sometimes that person does have to hit rock bottom. However, on the other side of that, I do feel, based on talking with friends, talking with clients, talking with just anyone, even people that will DM me through, Instagram, sometimes there needs to be prevention resources and awareness, right? And so when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about awareness and someone trying to be aware of their traumatic situations, because I've met clients where they're like, my childhood was happy, didn't have any trauma, blah, blah, blah. But then I'm noticing things like they'll have difficulty with relationships with others,
Correct.
or they'll have difficulty concentrating. And obviously, as a therapist, we want to rule out anything medical, right? So we do encourage them to, go to the doctor. Let's make sure that if they're reporting memory stuff, we want to make sure that their brain is okay and their body's okay.
Right.
But then if the doctor doesn't find anything, this is when you can get curious, because how I approach it with my clients is that when the word trauma gets brought up, right, everybody defines it differently. Yes. Some people, and a lot of the older generation, including my mom, including my dad, including a lot of my clients who are primarily older adults, they think trauma is war, is,
sexual abuse, rape.
Yeah.
You've been all of violated, kind of all that stuff.
Yeah. Act of terrorism, like they go to that extreme, and that's what happens. They do. They go to that extreme because, hello, that's what they were always taught. You know what I mean? Right. So when we're given these kind of blueprints and these things when we are a child, right, we learn what relationships are, even if it's unhealthy. We learn, like, what is this? What is, we learn eating habits, sleeping habits, socialization habits, like all those kind of things. And I think part of the thing is becoming aware of how it's impacting your life. So when I get curious, whether it's with a friend or a client, obviously treat it differently. But say a friend is coming to me, and I've had this happen with some girls, and they're like, oh, I don't understand why I keep having these toxic men gravitate towards me.
Right.
And I get curious, and I, just ask, like, well, how do you know that they're toxic? Like, what do you define as toxic, right? Because I want to know their definitions of things, first of all, because sometimes people tend to judge when it's like, well, you don't know where they're coming from faith-wise. You don't know where they're coming from cultural-wise. Right. And that plays a factor into how they define things and perceive things.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, I'll usually like kind of check in and kind of assess, like, well, how do you know that, like, they're toxic? Like, what are they doing? And they'll say, oh, they're being verbally abusive and they're saying this, this, and this. And I say, well, how do you respond when that happens? And sometimes they'll say, well, I don't say anything. Why not? I'll get curious, right? Because I'll be like, well, why not? Like, do you think that's okay for him to talk to you like that? And I say it in a non-judgmental tone, right? Because some people will be like, well, you know that this isn't okay and blah, blah, blah. But
right.
Shame doesn't help people grow.
It does not.
Understanding does. And when you talk with anyone, whether their childhood was happy or whether it was horrible, if it's impacting their life, that's where I'd get curious. Are you turning to things that are not healthy coping skills? Like, how's the alcohol intake? How's the fast food intake? Do you use sex to self-soothe, which a lot of the generation sometimes does do that. They'll use sex, and that's what they call intimacy, or that's what they call connection.
Correct.
Sex is a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. However, that's not what intimacy always is. Intimacy can be outside of the bedroom. Intimacy is intellectual conversation sometimes. Intimacy is feeling vulnerable and safe when you've identified that somebody is safe, right? And so I think a lot of the time, I want to know, is it impacting their life?
Right.
Some people might go on, and I've seen this happen, they'll go on and on and on and on and on, and they think, no, it's not impacting my life. I'm great. I'm good. Okay. So then when they come up to goals, if goals are brought up or anything like that, then I'll ask them, well, what are some barriers? What kind of gets in the way?
Girl, that's
is it any negative thought?
That is my thing, because I tell the women all the time, and I had to tell myself, like, those areas that you are struggling in, those things that you feel like you have to fight for, like, why is it so hard for you to save money? Why do you feel like you can't finish anything? Yeah. Why is it so hard for you to have a relationship? How come you can be surrounded around people and feel isolated and alone? Like, those things you have to be aware of and look at, because there's something there. It's not something where, like you said, you should be ashamed about it. But that is probably, we don't know, the thing that is stopping you from going to the next level, because it might be some trauma behind it
Yeah.
that you haven't even addressed,
Mhm.
right? And
It
it
could
could
be
be
trauma
as,
or just even low self-esteem too sometimes.
look, and it could be as simple as you was the person that got laughed at in the class, right?
Or bullied or
Or
yeah. Yeah.
bullied or anything like that. And you learn how to work through that.
Mhm.
So I love that you said that, because nobody talks about what the foundation is, because if
Mhm.
you don't finish anything, you're considered lazy, you're
Yeah.
considered a procrastinator, right? If you are in a relationship and you're trying to figure out why things are happening like that, then you might be being toxic in a relationship, or you might be the one that's silly and don't know what's going on, where really is probably something else.
Mhm. And it can be, I've definitely heard this happen where, sometimes women can blame like the guy and say that he's the toxic, blah, blah, blah. Which,
Mhm.
okay, yes, there are clear warning signs and clear situations, but sometimes there's two parties in a relationship. You gotta look at, did I play a part in that?
I had to
The answer
apologize
might
to
be
my
no.
I
It
had to
might.
apologize to my ex-husband, because I blamed him. I'm like, you the one who cheated, you the one who did this, you the one who did that. I was at home doing all, and he like, you don't even listen. You don't know the part you played in this. I
Mhm.
was begging you to help me,
Yeah.
and you didn't listen to me. I was asking you to do this, and you, and in my head, you know what I'm saying? A man is supposed to do this, and you are
Yeah.
supposed to handle this, right? And you are supposed to take care of me, and you, so not knowing what you said,
Mhm.
culture,
What he was brought up
what
with.
he was brought up with,
What
how
was
things
his
work.
expectations of the
That's right.
relationship? Yeah.
Right, but we don't take that into account,
Mhm.
because we sit up there and we say that it is, all these things that are outside of us versus what's going on in us, you know.
Mhm.
So I would say my last question is, what kind of tips can you give us? Because I know you are a business owner, so you know the transition, how to,
Yeah, I'm
set
basically wearing
goals.
all three hats right now. Well,
Right.
technically four, because I
And
work
it's
full
like
time, marketing agency, then I'm on the committees, then the PhD, and then I am in a very loving, supportive, amazing relationship. So it's
but you
you
know what I
wear
see? I see a person who has worked on themselves, who knows how to transition from one to the other, who
Mhm.
knows how to use that same brain that has been affected by trauma or anything, to be self-aware and know how to move. And that's why you can do these things. That's why you can have a loving
Got
relationship.
into the healing, I would not be an effective therapist. I wouldn't be a business owner and know how to, have those relationships with my marketing clients. And a
Can
lot
you
of
give
it,
us some tips that we can take home
yes.
tonight to start, besides praying it out and the demons, what you said? What you said? Get the demons out.
You're not praying hard enough. That was,
Yeah, yeah.
let's just say that made me pissed.
What are some of the things that we can do?
Yes. So I would say, like, as a business owner, I'm going to talk about like the 5 steps to strengthen, your mental health as a business owner, whether it's a small business, a big business.
Right.
We all start somewhere, right? The first one I would talk about is, paying attention to the here and now,
Mhm.
which means sometimes when you're a business owner, you can have a lot of anxiety, right? Like freaking out about like money
Mhm.
and getting your name out there. And is this idea even like good, right? And sometimes we need to pull that back, right? Like let's reel ourselves in.
Yeah.
And a lot of what mindfulness is focusing on the here and now. While it's beautiful to think of goals 5, 10, 15 years, and have those goals written down or, anything like that, you also need to pull yourself back in and focus on, well, what's one thing that I can do today to get me to that goal? Is
Mhm.
it, you know, investing in business cards? Is it paying someone to do a website? Is it hiring somebody to do your marketing because you're so busy running a business, which some of my clients do. They're so busy running a business, they don't got time to post on, Instagram or Facebook or anything.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of like invest in yourself. And if you find that you have like a good business idea, but maybe like the self-esteem, or maybe you are noticing trauma coming up, get help. You
Mhm.
know, healing doesn't always have to be 5, 6, 7 years, right? Like
Right.
sometimes when people think of therapy, they're like, oh God, I don't know if I want to do this forever, right?
Right.
But I know people that sometimes, does therapy once a month or once every 2 weeks, and they're good. So it just kind of depends, number one, on the connection you have with the therapist, but
Mhm.
also focusing on that here and now. There's been a lot of research that our brain, and especially in westernized culture, we're very fast,
Yeah.
fast, 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 right? And so it's one of those things that look at like things like meditation. Look at, before you wake up in the morning, instead of how most of us grab our phone,
At the
take those
phone.
5 or 10 minutes to breathe. If you are someone who is religious or believes in a faith, use that time to pray. Use that time to write in your gratitude journal. Anything like that that kind of pulls you into the here and now will set you up for success in your business, right? Because you got to lay the foundation. I don't know how to build websites to save my life. So when I was starting my marketing agency, I had the content, I had the photos that my boyfriend took,
Mhm.
but I don't know how to build a website. And yes, it was Squarespace, but I just don't know how. And I was just
Right,
so
right, right.
busy. So I was like, let me pay someone, you know? Number one, I'm helping them, right?
Right,
Because they have income, right? But also they're helping me.
right,
And it was great. We formed a great connection. This is someone I might hire to, be my assistant when I pick up a couple more clients. So it's
right,
like you never know the connections that you're going to make when you slow down. What are the
right.
basic steps, right? If you're a business owner, write down like a couple tasks, and then even break that task. If you're talking about building a website, okay, break that task into looking at referrals,
Yeah.
looking at what platform you want, going on YouTube, watching videos, right? Anything like that. Um, Another tip I would say, like my second tip, would be connecting with others is just so, so, so important.
Absolutely.
Um, as a business owner, I did notice that when my friends started realizing that I launched a business, some of them kind of teetered out,
Of course.
which is interesting because sometimes when somebody sees you being successful, it'll trigger their stuff. Maybe
Mhm.
not necessarily trauma, but it might trigger their jealousy, their stuff.
Right.
And at first, I, was kind of, huh? And I asked some of my girls that do marketing full time, and they said, yeah, yeah, we noticed that some of our friends would be kind of wishy-washy. And what's so interesting is, and I truly believe this, whether you're a business owner or not, who you surround yourself with matters.
Come on and say that.
It matters so much. And I'm not telling you to surround yourself with
Didn't
friends that
say
are just
that.
going to pat your back and,
Nope.
oh, you're doing great, sweetie. Like, no. You need friends that are going to be real with you, but also in a loving and supporting way, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying that like guilt or shame might not come up on your end or their end or whatever, but relationships also are practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you're a business owner, you're forming relationships with local collaborations. If you're doing other businesses and you want to collaborate, you're making relationships with your customers.
Absolutely.
If I didn't put the time and effort into having relationships with every single one of my marketing clients and make sure we're checking in weekly, even if they're only checking in once a month on Zoom, I still communicate with them. I'm
Yeah.
sending emails, I'm sending text messages, those kind of thing. And we built a friendship. And because of that, it's still a business relationship, but it's also a friendship. And these are now long-term clients
Right.
versus they said, oh, let me try like 1 or 2 months, which I totally understand, budgeting, and we're in COVID. So I totally get it. Um, but now they've seen what I've done, all those kind of things. And it's that relationship, right? Um, and it's just so important because if you're also around other people that are doing their business and they're trying to build it off the ground, or you're talking with other business owners that have successfully created it, it's going to motivate you too.
Of course.
You're going to be like, you know what, this person overcome adversity and trials and trauma. Well, why can't I do that?
Right.
Right?
And it
Or
and it
you know what?
also
Yeah.
it also gives you the opportunity to like, really form those long lasting bonds because you're you started out as a relationship in business, but then it turns into something else. It turns into that friendship, and then it turns into that community where you are around other people who care about their healing, who care about, making sure they keep their mental health in order, which is important, you
It's
know.
so important because as a business owner, you're going to go through so much stress and
Oh,
so much
um,
anxiety and fear and all of that. And,
you go
you
through
know,
800 emotions a day.
exactly. You're
You
going to
just
be
get
like,
through it.
in the morning, I'm totally okay. I got my coffee by 4
Yep,
p.m. Like,
that's
right?
right.
Totally get it. Totally get it. And there's many times where I doubted it or, those kind of things. But if you're passionate about it, why not?
That's
Find
right.
other people that are going to be passionate about it, right? And be with you. And what did inspire me was I was seeing other girlfriends do
Right.
this, and they had launched their marketing agencies and they had been successful for many, many, many years.
So
So it's kind of,
what's your social media so we can
oh,
connect with you?
my website is, my name is Jennifer Adams. So I just put jadamsmarketing.com.
Ah, that's
That's the
cool.
website the girl created for me. She's fantastic if anyone needs her, and she's very affordable. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
She's so sweet. I had her do 50 million edits, but it was
Oh.
just because like wording and
Mm-hmm.
take this picture and put a different picture. But and then it's on Instagram, it's J Adams Marketing right there as well on Instagram. And the connecting with others is just so important too, because right now with COVID, I'm in LA. So while a lot of things are still open, there's still this isolation piece. When you're
Exactly.
chasing your dreams, whether it's pre-COVID, before COVID, after COVID, there can still be some isolation. So I would definitely suggest, there's a lot of beautiful, and if anyone needs them, they can direct message me on Instagram. But there are some beautiful groups, on Facebook that's like women empowerment, women in business, that kind of thing. The same is true for men, if men, are listening, and that can just really help. My third thing is get enough sleep,
Yeah.
right? Get enough sleep and fuel your body the right way. For instance, my boyfriend knows this. He knows if I do not get enough sleep, I will be a grizzly bear. I'm like,
Right.
not happy, and I can't do a lot of coffee, so it's like, because that'll trigger my anxiety. So I'm like, so getting enough sleep also impacts the brain, right? We know that if we get enough sleep and if we eat, healthy to an extent. I like to eat like 80-20, like 80% healthy, 20% whatever I want.
Yeah.
It's worked for me. But also whatever we're putting in our body gives us energy too, right? Like if you're eating things like leafy vegetables or green vegetables or salmon, chicken, like a lot of these things have those vitamins that we're not getting. And I also take like a multivitamin. I've noticed since taking a multivitamin, my energy is better. And so, I also have eczema, so I have to watch what I eat.
Right.
And I've noticed that, because of my stress level being lower, because of I'm in a very happy and amazing relationship, guess what? My skin started healing a lot faster than it did before,
Wow.
which is just crazy. The fourth tip I would say for business owners to strengthen your mental health is always be learning. If therapy is not your thing, try groups out. Try networking and women empowerment groups. If you want to try therapy, I always tell people I've so far found two friends, awesome therapists that they're with. And I always say you can go to psychologytoday.com. You can type in your zip code. You can pick I think it's on the left side. I think they still have it on the left side. It'll say if you want a male or female therapist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sometimes that matters. Um, you can pick like what your insurance is. You can pick like what issues you might want to talk about. So maybe it's trauma, maybe it's just self-esteem, anything like that. And then they'll put people in your area. And it's kind of like the funny way that I can describe this is it's like dating profiles, but for therapists. Because they post like what they offer and like how they approach therapy and what modalities they use and what orientations do they use, cognitive behavioral or whatever. So it's kind of funny. And my boyfriend's therapist, some of them will put little videos and they're like intro videos, and it was the cutest thing. I was like, I think you'll match with him. And they did. They hit it off like right away. I was like, it's 2 for 2. And another thing I would also say, I mean, I could go on with tips forever, but the last thing I would say for strengthening your mental health as a business owner is strengthen the time management skills.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, people are like, wait a minute, Jen, you work full time, and then you have a business, and then you have school, and then you have your boyfriend, and then you also work out. Like, how do you do it all? And I'm like, a calendar.
Correct.
Like, I have a full caseload, so I have to pencil in my clients. I have to keep calling them. I have like productivity I have to meet, so I'm always consistently, marking down clients and, all those things. I pencil in when I'm doing swimming. I pencil in when I'm doing my nails. Like, everything is on that calendar. And then the working out for me, thankfully my gym opened up again, so I was always a swimmer. I loved swimming. Also an Aries, so it's kind of interesting how the water will calm me. But swimming is just so good, right? Because I can take any anxiety from that day. I swim a bunch of laps. It helps my heart.
That's
and
right.
then I have anxiety and chronic depression. Well, guess what? That helps me sleep real good at night because I'm exhausted. Okay. The anxiety and stress was already put out in my workout, and I didn't have to lift weights or anything. I just swam, which is still intense still. But for me, like, if I don't do these things, I can't show up for my clients. I can't.
Exactly.
Like, my boss has even gotten on me about, like, you need to take days off. You don't always take days off. And I'm like, I like working and staying productive. But since I've been in this field longer, I've realized I need to take more days off. I need to do a lot more. And now that I've carved out that self-care and all of that, now it's working. Not everyone has the luxury to take days off and get paid for it, right? So it's like, if I have it, let's do it so that I'm more adequately there and present with my clients, because a lot of my clients have been through trauma. And if I don't take care of myself, I can't help. I can't,
And I would say to you, like, I just admire everything that you are doing right now, because I think the work that you're doing is so important. And I strongly believe that there is like this, just like this new era, just new revolution going on, where people are caring about their mental health. They're caring about what happened to them, because no longer do you want to sit and just, you know, be mediocre anymore. You want to be able to do something with your life. You want to understand why you cannot do, or struggling to do, what comes easy to others. You want to know why things are happening, or what happened, you know. And Jennifer, I thank you so much for being here. And I thank you for having this conversation with me. Give us your Instagram and your social media one more time.
Yes. So my personal brand, where I do bring mental health into the beauty and fashion realm, is Instagram.com/runway. So like catwalk, runway red because red hair, and then LA because of my location. And then my marketing page is jadamsmarketing.com or Instagram.com jadamsmarketing. If anybody, I'm a big book and resource nerd. So if anybody needs resources into, like, well, how do I find a therapist in my area? Or do you recommend a book on self-esteem or healing from trauma? I'm your girl, because I like nerd out on a lot of that stuff. And then with these committees, we always get like so many articles and different things that I'm always learning too. So if anyone needs that, I'm here. And it was so lovely. And I hope these tips help someone out there.
It definitely helped me, and I had a couple of aha moments. And Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. We'll definitely meet soon. You're in LA right now, right?
Yeah, I've lived in LA for this year will mark 7 years. So
Oh wow. Oh
yeah,
wow. So I know we're gonna try to get to the West Coast, but when we do, we definitely gonna give you a call, okay?
definitely. All right. Well, you
All
have a good
right.
day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.